We're live.
God. Oh my God. That's so cool.
Crazy.
I'm just
How's
gonna
it?
reload our Twitch page.
Oh, fun, fun, fun. How's everyone doing today?
I'm good. If you can tell, I'm in my pajamas because we had a fire alarm this morning and I didn't have time to get ready for the stream. Yeah.
That sucks.
It was so weird too, because like they got the fire alarm started for the entire like block, and then they just had all of the management people come knocking at the door like really aggressively, trying to get people to get out. But there wasn't any fire, so I didn't understand why they were trying to get us to go out. But yeah, ruined my morning, but it's okay. Now I get to work with you guys, so it's gonna be all good.
My fire alarm was going off at my house last week, and my mom like just was fed up with it, and she turned off the electricity in our house.
Oh
And
my
I was,
God.
like dealing with it, and then like 5 minutes later, she realized that like smoke detectors are battery operated, so like, they kept going off, and
Oh my God.
it's
That
just
is such a boss move, just be like, no electricity for anyone.
yep.
Did she then remove the fire alarms? The batteries.
I think she did. She called me the other day and was like, "Yep, I just took out the batteries of for the smoke detectors. Like, I can't do this anymore." And I was like, "Maybe like you should be concerned that like there's like I don't know carbon monoxide in the house or something. Whatever smoke detectors do these days."
Emily, how are you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. I got like it's like midterm season, so it's been kind of tough. But yeah, we gotta push through. I can't believe it's like actually week 5 already, and I can't believe it. We're already like halfway through the quarter. I'm just like, where did January go? It's like a figment of my imagination.
It is true. We're like almost halfway through, and then finals are just gonna like show up one day.
Like,
I'm not even gonna realize it.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Go.
No, I was just gonna say this Renaz Cal. I don't know how to pronounce it, but this person always shows up and supports our live stream. So thanks for joining.
Oh my God, thank you. We love you.
We love you.
One fan.
What were you saying, Danielle?
Oh yeah, that's crazy that you're like already at midterms because I haven't even started classes yet this semester.
That's true. You guys are starting way later, huh?
Yeah, I don't start for like another week.
Oh my God. But then you guys don't end up actually getting like a spring break or anything, right?
Yeah, no spring break. And my classes finish like after graduation. Doesn't make any sense.
Oh my God, that's so weird.
Yep. I don't know. It makes no sense. And then 2 days after finals are done, I have to move out of my apartment. So that should be very fun.
You can come stay with me, although I'm pretty sure you're like way too far, but
yeah. I think it might just be a little bit easier to just go home.
True. Also free knowledge, yes, please. I know, right? Honestly, it's the best. But yeah, do you guys want to talk about what today's stream is going to be about?
Yeah, sure. So, we're gonna be starting the first JavaScript lesson today, and we're gonna be going over like getting started, like setting up your computer, and then also like we're getting into like the beginning of HTML and JavaScript. Anything else you want to add, Emily? Because I don't know if I remember everything.
I think you basically covered everything. We were going to do like a kind of a live coding demo as well. So how to set up an HTML file and how to incorporate kind of like JavaScript and all that. So it'll be a fun time.
Awesome. I'm really excited. Oh, we have a question already.
The previous code. Oh, I'm actually not sure about that because I have never had that issue. Let me look that up. Let's see.
Mm-hmm. Can you screen share what you're Googling as well so they can see how to do it?
Yeah, sure. So basically, as a computer science major, I literally just Google everything.
That's too real.
Some of these are funny. Okay, so Stack Overflow has the answers to literally everything. Looks
That's
like it is
true.
not installed on your machine.
Yeah, usually if you come across an issue like that, like 100 people have already, more than 100 people have already come across that, so there's got to be an answer somewhere online.
Yeah, so this looks like you don't have Git installed, which yeah, that makes sense. If that's what it's saying. And do not add Git to the path. If you add your existing Git client, so add the path to Git executable in your Visual Studio Code settings. I guess maybe this could be helpful. Also, do you have like GitHub desktop or anything installed on your computer? Because I know I have that installed, and maybe that kind of like did that work for me. I could send the
Quick
link.
break. Margaret from Twilio's here. Hey, Margaret, how are you doing?
I have already defeated technical difficulties this morning, so I'm having a good day. How are y'all?
Pretty good, pretty good.
We're
We're
good. We're so
great.
happy to have you here. Thank you so much for joining us.
Delighted to be here.
We're currently troubleshooting, trying to figure out why someone's having problems with not having Git on their VS Code. Do you know anything about this?
Not from the description that you've given just now. I'm not sure that I have a clear picture of what the problem is.
That's totally fine. We're just Googling things and trying to figure out if there's a way to resolve it right now before we get started on the actual JavaScript introduction.
So we verified that Git is installed on the
Yeah.
computer?
I'm not sure if they have it installed. Do you know if you have Git installed on your computer?
I think they
I'm going to
said
recommend
no, I
installing Git.
It's probably a good idea. Also, it says that you could install you could like uninstall Visual Studio Code and then reinstall it for the first time with no existing Git install. So maybe let me go to the Visual Studio Code download website. Actually, I think I have the tab open in another browser. Yeah, so let's see. I have a Mac. I already have it downloaded, but let's see what happens.
Also, I'm sending a quick link in the chat that kind of shows how you can check whether or not you already have Git. So try to do the Git version thing, see what the response is, and if not, you might have to just manually download Git.
Yeah, I can send the link of this GitHub. This seems like helpful, so I'm going to send this. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. So yeah, this seems helpful. Yeah, and it's not letting me really re-download it because I have Visual Studio Code installed. But yeah, you could also message us on Discord if like later if you have any issues, and we could try to help you out if none of that works.
Awesome. Then Danielle, do you want to get started with the introductions?
Yeah, sure. So I'm Danielle. I'm one of the instructors for the BitCamp for JavaScript. Today I'm here with Emily, Margaret, and Shreya. Do you guys want to introduce yourselves?
Hey, I'm Shreya. I'm not an instructor. I'm just chilling here.
I guess, hey, I'm Emily. I'm also a BitCamp instructor with Danielle.
Hi, I'm Margaret, and I am a developer educator at Twilio. we make Twilio Quest. Well, on my team, we do other things at the company.
Very cool. Yeah, so like this bit camp is co-hosted with Twilio, and Margaret's going to be helping us out along with some other mentors that will be like helping you throughout this whole entire boot camp with like any problems you have. But yeah, so without further ado, let's get started with the lesson. I'll start sharing my screen. Okay. So yeah, these are our social medias. If you want to like connect with us on there, that would be cool. And yeah, this is the intro to JavaScript with Twilio week 1. So today we're going to be going over just like the basics. So the first thing we're going to talk about is installing Visual Studio Code. Then we're going to get into like some GitHub stuff and like how to link your GitHub account to Visual Studio Code. And then we'll talk about HTML and JavaScript. So yeah, installing Visual Studio Code, like I showed you guys earlier, you're going to want to follow this link. Emily, you could send the link in the chat to download Visual Studio Code.
Yeah, sure. I'll do that right now.
What'd you say?
I can do that right now.
Okay, awesome. So yeah, you could just click this link based on whatever operating software you use. And then, yeah, so it will like basically walk you through it yourself, basically. And it's a pretty simple process. Just download it. And then...
Sorry to interrupt you, Danielle. How do I send it in the chat? It seems like it's not sending for me.
I think if you go into the comments on the right side, if you click comments for everyone.
So if you're not a host of the stream, then you're not going to have access to the send box to the comments. So you're going to need to open up this stream in Twitch to get access to sending comments if you're not the host. And I highly recommend muting it as soon as you pull it up, or else you're going to get the woo 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 effect from.
Yeah, I don't know how to mute this. I'm not good with streaming. Sorry, guys. So wait, how do I do that? Oh, pause. Smart. That's not a pause button. Let's do stop sharing. And then I will send that link.
Let's see. I guess as we're waiting for Danielle to send the link, I guess Margaret, do you want to talk about your maybe experience at Twilio or what Twilio is about? Give an introduction to people.
I can talk about any of those things. So Twilio is about making it really easy for developers to add communications to their applications. That's the original core mission, because once upon a time, a long time ago, you had to hire some really intense engineering specialists in order to interact with telecom systems, because that is old school technology. So what Twilio did is we built a software layer in between that old school telecom technology and the web, so that like just web developers could add communications to their applications, because we're humans. Communicating is what we do. And we've just kind of been expanding for the last 10 years. So it started out with like SMS and voice, and now it is also like WhatsApp and Facebook Messenger and video and like everything. If it's a form of communication that's not in person, we have an API for that. And my role at Twilio, I've been working at Twilio for like 3.5 or so years now, and I was hired as something called a developer evangelist. I'm pretty sure that the evangelism team has since retired that name, but evangelism is what developer relations used to be called once upon a time, a long time ago. And since Twilio is one of the first companies to have this kind of role, we had the old school name for a really long time, including when I was hired about 3.5 years ago. So what I did in that role is I was the developer evangelist for the PHP programmer community and for underrepresented developers. And so I created events and spoke at events and stuff to try and like support those communities, and that was super fun. But then this last year I transitioned onto the Twilio Quest team, and what we do is we develop the Twilio Quest educational video game, and I am, in addition to creating content for the game, I am also in charge of our community growth. Oh, and I
that's
also help out with our education partnerships, which is how I get to be here right now.
Wow, that's awesome. And someone in the comments said they went to a Twilio instructional thing in DC like 8 years ago. I don't remember it though, but that's cool.
Yeah, we've been very, very into like the developer education space for a million years. In fact, the Twilio Quest started out as gamification of micro tutorials specifically to serve as the curriculum for our full day educational workshop things, and it kind of evolved from there.
Awesome. That's really cool. But yeah, so back to the Visual Studio Code thing. I sent the link in the chat. We sent out a video a couple days ago that, or maybe just yesterday, I'm not sure, that should like guide you through downloading Visual Studio Code and linking it. But we're just going to walk through that again, like in case you guys didn't get a chance to see it. So I'm going to share my screen again. So yeah, once you have Visual Studio Code open, I'm going to have you guys like open up your GitHub Learning Lab, which is, I'll send the link in the chat again. And yeah, so you're going to want to follow that link to start your GitHub Learning Lab. I think I have the link right here. And you're going to click Start Free Course. So if you don't already have a GitHub account, this is when you can do that. Does anyone like need me to explain anything further, like as far as like setting up a GitHub account? Just like in the comments, can you guys let me know if like you don't have a GitHub account and you want me to walk through going over that? Are we all good?
I think all good for now.
Okay. Awesome. So once you have, once you click like start your course, it'll already log you into GitHub, hopefully. Otherwise, it might just prompt you to sign in, and it'll bring you to this page. I already started some of it, so it says resume next step, but you could just ignore that. Over here, you're going to see the course repository that GitHub automatically created for you. So I'm going to have you guys click on that. And then it'll bring you to your repository. So over here, you're going to click code and then make sure that you're underneath the HTTPS button, and then copy this link. This is the link to clone your repository. Does anyone have any questions so far? Okay, awesome. So I'm going to open up Visual Studio Code, and I'm going to click clone repository, which is something that'll just pop in on like the start page. I'm going to click this, and I'm going to paste that link that I just copied into the little, I don't know what this is called, whatever you put words into, little text box, right, that it prompts you with, and then you're going to click clone from URL. Next, you're just going to want to pick a path. It doesn't really matter. I like putting it in my GitHub folder. And then it's just important that you choose a folder that doesn't have any files in it. Like if I wanted to choose here, I couldn't because there are like already files in here. If I wanted to click a folder in there that has no files, then I guess that would work, but that just don't do that because that would mess up my repository. So yeah, into like my GitHub folder is fine. And then it will create a new folder for me automatically. And then you would just click open and it'll open up your workspace. And yeah, so from here, you can like create a new file, clicking this button, create a new folder. And this will like refresh it or like fetch for you. And then So like the first thing you're going to want to do when this is like all for like working on your homework. You don't have to like get started on that now, but like I just figured we would walk through it real quick. When you start your homework, you're going to want to create a new branch for every single task that you do, which is also something that like will be explained in the homework in case you forget. But you'll just click this little button down here that has the branch that says main. And then you're going to want to create a new branch. So in the homework, I'll tell you like you want to name each branch like your GitHub username. Mine's D'Angelo1, and then a hyphen and the week number, and then a hyphen and then the task number. So week 1, task 1 would look like that. And then you would just click create new branch. And then from there, now you can see on the bottom, I'm in that branch. And then this, I think, this fetches like, oh no, that's the published changes. This shows your problems though. And then you would click this button to create a new file, this to create a new folder. I think I just said that. And so, yeah, let's say I wanted to create a new file like example.html. Click enter. And then if I go over here, you'll see that there's a little 1 because I made a new change. So you would click this button. This is like your branch button. And then from here, you can you could stage your changes, right? Oh yeah. So click this little.
Danielle, there's a question about whether they should use their GitHub username or their real name in the chat.
I like to use my GitHub username. It's up to you, but like I said in like the homework to use your GitHub username, but like it's also something that is only going to show up for you, so it doesn't really matter. But yeah, I would, if you if you want me to just give you an answer, your GitHub username. But yeah. So from here, if you wanted to stage your changes once you're done making, so say I like finished my task 1, I would click this little plus button and that just staged my change. And then from there you will commit. And basically if you've never used GitHub before, what I mean by like staging changes, like this basically saves your changes but doesn't actually push them to your repository. From here, like committing them will like change them on your local machine, but like they don't get changed to your repository until you push. So we're going to commit by clicking this little check mark, and then you'll have to enter a message to commit. So let's say like finished task 1, and this message is going to pop up on your GitHub once you push it. So like name it appropriately, please. And then just hit enter to save that. And then from there, once you've made your commit, that like wraps up all your changes. And then you would click these 3 little dots over here and then click push. And that would change your changes, save your changes onto your repository, like on the GitHub website, instead of just like locally on your computer. And yeah, that would be everything you need to do to like save your changes. And then you'll have to open a pull request later to merge your branches, because a branch basically just like puts all of your work onto like a separate part of your repository, so that your main branch has all your final work. But yeah, I can go over that later. And that's also something that is covered in the homework and in the video that Emily sent out yesterday. Does anyone have any questions about this? I'm sorry, I went through it kind of quickly.
See, there's a question in the chat. So this is all basically to sync up local files and the GitHub files online?
Yep. So once you like do all your homework, this basically just like syncs it to your files online. Yeah.
So the push part and the merge part is, yes, syncing up local files and the GitHub files online. However, I want to mention that when you commit, that's basically the equivalent of a save this particular moment in time of my project. And the way that that's different from like if you were working on a doc and you want to hit, save over and over again or have it automatically save for you so you don't lose your changes. What this is, every time you make a commit, it saves it right at that moment in time. So say if you want to go back to that particular place, because that's when you made a critical decision and you want to change your mind about that, you can roll those commits back one at a time. So the commit thing, that's for you on your local. That's to help you. That's a super useful tool for your development process, and it's all files local to your machine. But when you push, you're pushing to the GitHub far away, and then when you're merging, you are again merging files that are far away from you. So just remember the commit is local for you, and the push and merge are the far away source of truth stuff.
That's such a good way of explaining it. Thank you so much. Yeah, so does anyone else have any questions about this?
And I guess I have one thing to add. I made sure to mention it in the video, but make sure every single time you do a new branch. Oh, yeah, exactly. You would create a new branch for every single task that you do for the course. So each homework for each week has a few tasks. So make sure you that every time you start a new task to make a new branch. Yeah, keep that in mind, y'all.
Okay. So now from here, yeah, so I think that's everything I wanted to go over about Visual Studio Code and GitHub for now. Now I think we're going to get back into HTML. Okay, yes, we went through all of this.
And for your reference, we'll also be sharing these slides in the Discord, so you guys can look them over for like future reference.
Yep. Okay, so now Emily's going to talk a little bit about HTML.
All right, HTML. So I guess before we dive into HTML, I just want to ask a question to Margaret. Do you have any like experience with HTML, and what do you think of the language if you do?
Lols. Yeah, I have some experience with HTML. Okay, so one thing to know about me is I'm super old. So once upon a time, a long, long time ago, the web came out and I was a teenager, and right-click view source was magical, because once upon a time, a long, long time ago, when the web was new, everything that was cool on a website was very easy to learn how to do because it wasn't super complicated yet. Like now you look at a website and you look at the source code for that, and it's like, it's a huge massive application. Like you can't just intuitively read a React app if you don't know React. And honestly, so much of the code that runs super cool websites now is obfuscated. So if you click right click view source, you're not actually seeing all of the code that's going into making the interaction that you're looking at. But once upon a time, a long, long time ago, when the web was new, you see something cool on the web, you right click view source, you are looking at exactly what is making that happen. And so I learned to make web stuff basically by copying the code that was doing cool things that I wanted to do, pasting it into my own local text editor, and then messing around with it until I could figure out which piece of it was doing what. So yes, I have a little experience with HTML. Because back in the day, that's what there was. There was HTML and JavaScript, and then PHP and CSS, and then the web ate the world, and things got complicated.
Wow, that's great. I guess for maybe someone that doesn't have any like coding experience or any experience in HTML, what do you think? Do you think HTML is easy to learn, or is it hard to understand? I guess, what do you think going into HTML?
I think it's pretty easy to learn for native English speakers, and that's something that I really want to point out for like a lot of the languages that we lean on a great deal in web development. They are, I mean, we think of them, we call them languages, but really they're all in English. And so if you're a native English speaker, you already have an edge when it comes to learning languages. And if you're not a native English speaker, I am so sorry. about this particular thing that I did not do, but I understand that it makes your life more difficult, and I'm sorry. And there are amazing, brilliant human beings that are working on creating programming languages in languages that aren't English, but I am not one of those human beings. But if you are not an English speaker, maybe do some research and see if there is an awesome, super cool programming language in your native language that you could become a super kick-ass expert at. But HTML is a super friendly place to start for native English speakers because it really does spell out what it does pretty clearly most of the time. I would say that a good way to think about HTML is like if you've ever made like a doc or in like a print shop or something, like if you've made your own like greeting cards or whatever, you've highlighted text and you've made it bold or you've made it a different color and you've moved stuff around. Basically, HTML is, instead of doing that in an UI, you do it with little tags that tell it to do that. And so basically it's just manipulating the things that you would manipulate in like a print shop or a paint UI, only you're doing it with tags. So if you want something to be blue, you put some tags around it to tell it to be blue. If you want it to be a header, you put some tags around it to be a header. And that's very straightforward once you've got your head wrapped around it, and it probably sounds complicated when I'm talking about it.
I think that's so cool that you literally just like learned it by looking at websites. Like I remember when I was like younger, I had like a blog and I literally took an HTML class in high school so that I could like design that blog. And I would do that. I would do the view source thing to like check out how other people design their blogs and like steal their code basically.
That's perfect. Okay, so somebody in the chat is asking, what is good practice for the commit messages? And that depends a lot on your work environment. I would say that while you're learning, and honestly, in a lot of projects down the road, you should write commit messages that are for future you. You should summarize what you have changed so that if you're trying to go back, like remember how I said that every commit is like holding that place in time for your development. So if you're making a decision, you can go back and change that decision later. Then leave yourself a note to tell you what save point that is and what decision you are saving it for, or what changes you have made in that commit. And if you're working on a team, you just need to think about your audience. So when it's just you, those messages are for you. If you're working with a team, or if you're working on a project that's going to well outlive your time on it, then just think about who's most likely to be looking at that in the future. Is it a team at your company? Is it random open source developers because you're open sourcing a project? Think about your audience and just trying to write that commit message for them. I don't think it's a good idea to go into like a huge essay of all of the thought processes behind it. However, there are different kinds of documentation and decision tree documentation, things that are for that sort of thing. But with your commit messages, I say keep it super simple. You're just trying to convey what has changed in that commit, what decisions were made that you are saving the state around, so that when somebody is going back through and reading it, they can understand the meat of that commit as easily as possible. Which leads me to a follow-up, which is that you should really not make commits that are 10 billion things. You should make bite-sized commits. Commit often, and make your commit messages super simple, because your commit is super simple. That's my suggestion.
Yeah, and also even if your audience is just yourself, like it's really good practice to like make commit messages that are like make sense. Like I know sometimes like when I'm coding, I will commit stuff and just be like, make my commit message like, I'm so sick of this. But like it really is good if you make like genuine progress to like write down what you've done, because there are still times where like I will look back at my code from like other projects to help me with what I'm working on now, and I cannot find what I did because like I didn't make a good commit message. So like it's really useful to like make a commit message that just like tells you like what you've done in this like time since your last commit.
And when you're at level 2 Git, right now we're all at level 0 Git, so we're not going to worry about this right now. But when you are leveling up your Git skills, you will find out that you don't need to worry about making commits so often that you have a long chain of commits to read through, or other people have a long chain of commits to read through, because once you hit level 2 in Git, you will understand how to squash a whole series of commits that you've decided to keep into a single commit with a summary of all of those changes. Git is there to help you, but realize that it is a tool that you only need the tip of that iceberg right now. And honestly, you're only going to need the tip of that iceberg for most of your projects, but there's a whole iceberg under there. If you ever need to do anything complicated, Git has your back.
Great. Thank you so much for the overview. That was super helpful. And if you guys have any more questions with like Git or like committing, because I know most of you guys are like still kind of beginners with GitHub, and it can be really intimidating at first, but as you kind of like get in the rhythm of it, it'll be a lot more easy to understand. So yeah, I guess going back into HTML. So HTML stands for Hypertext Markup Language. So what exactly is like a markup language? I guess the definition of it would be a computer processing system designed for annotating and presenting text on web pages. So you use HTML to kind of build the foundation of a web page and describe the structure of like the website and all that. And then this is like a super cool shortcut that later Daniel will demonstrate how to do to kind of give you a basic skeleton HTML structure that you can work on. So every single time you're like, oh, I need to make an HTML file, but I know there's like a lot of different elements and headings, and I don't remember all of that. All you have to do is do exclamation tab, or you can type in HTML5, enter, and this will pop up. And
yeah, I'll demonstrate that right now.
oh, yeah, that's great.
So like I made this new file earlier. I'm just going to type in HTML that, or exclamation point tab, and it gives you all of this. And this is in Visual Studio Code. I'm not sure about other text editors, but for now we're just using Visual Studio Code anyway.
Yeah, so this is like super helpful, and I guess to explain exactly like what this kind of basic skeleton structure is, as you can see on the top of the page, it says like exclamation point doc type HTML. So basically all HTML documents have to start with like a doc type declaration, and this states what document type the browser should be expecting. So HTML5 is the newest specification of HTML. So that is, I guess, what we'll be using, and it's what most web pages are, basically all web pages are using right now. So yeah. And then now we're going to go into some basic HTML syntax. So I'll be talking about some vocabulary that you might bump into in the future, such as tags, attributes, forms, and elements. All right, so then for HTML tags, basically these determine how the web page is formatted and displayed. So HTML tags usually contain like 3 parts. So there's the opening tag, the content in between, and the closing tag. So to define tag, you kind of use these like caret bracket things, and you put the tag name in between. And a set of tags defines a HTML element. So as you can see kind of on the right, there are lots of sets of tags, and you can see there are sets of tags that are nested within other tags. So the big kind of tag that holds the HTML file is the HTML tag. That creates the HTML element, and that element holds the head element and the body element, and the head element contains the title element. And I feel like it sounds like a lot. Might sound confusing like in words, but I created like a little diagram. Hopefully you guys can understand it a little bit better. But you can see like the opening tag and closing tags, they're kind of create containers for these other elements to kind of nestle within. So yeah.
This is such a cute little graphic. I love it.
Yeah. I don't know. I like had a lot of fun on Google Slides. It's like maybe this will help me visualize a bit better.
This graphic design over here. I'm sorry.
One of the very, very, very common things to go wrong when people are learning all programming languages, and that includes HTML, is keeping in mind how things nest, and and making sure that you close all of the things in the right order to complete your nesting. HTML, like browsers try to be super forgiving, so the thing is it will do its best to guess what you wanted even if you didn't line up all of your opening and closing tags, and sometimes it guesses hilariously wrong. So if you're looking at something and it looks all wacky from what you expect, go check all of your opening and closing tags.
Yeah. Even. Oh, sorry. You go first.
Okay, sorry. I think that in Visual Studio Code, if you like click on it, it'll like highlight which one it connects to. Yeah. So like that's also super helpful.
That is definitely one of the big reasons to bother with one of these IDEs instead of just having a text editor like I used for way longer than was reasonable, because I didn't learn that things like that were in these software tools until I wasn't paying attention. I got old.
So yeah, make sure to try to like, especially with tags, to keep it neat, and to, if there is like tag nested within like a bigger tag, to kind of indent it so you can see that differentiation. Like, and as Margaret mentioned, sometimes it'll still load, like the content will still show up, but if you want to like update and maybe like check back on your code, it can get really confusing. You're like, I don't know what I did. So make sure just to keep it neat in the first place. So it'll definitely pay off in the future. Yep. And these are a few tags that you guys will be using and you guys will see in your homework. So the div tag, which is stands for division tag, I believe, can be used to kind of group together HTML elements, and this creates like a section or container for elements. And the p tag or paragraph tag defines a paragraph. So whatever text you put in between two p tags, a opening p tag and a closing p tag, that text will appear on the page. And then our last tag is a break tag. So this essentially inserts a break, a line break within the text. So as you can see, the difference between this tag with the other tags is that there's only one tag, there's no closing tag. And that's because break tags are empty tags, so it doesn't need a closing tag. And I guess a quick FYI is for paragraph tags, browsers automatically add a single blank line before and after each paragraph element. So you don't have to worry about like adding a line break and all that. Yeah. And then HTML attributes. So HTML attributes provide additional information about HTML elements. So let's see, attributes are usually added within the opening tags of elements after the tag name. So as you can see on the right, the HTML opening tag has lang equals en, and basically the lang attribute determines what language can be used in the element's content. So I guess some examples are en for English, and then I think es for Spanish, and fr for French. And to be honest, like because we usually use English, I haven't had to like change that part of the tag. But I guess bringing this question to Daniel or Margaret, have you guys ever had to like change or like you experiment with the language attribute? Because I feel like, I don't know, nobody that I've worked with has like ever changed that value at all.
It has been a really long time since I had to internationalize a site.
Really, yeah.
I've never been there.
Yeah, so I guess for your homework, you won't have to do that at all. So don't worry about that tag. You don't have to worry about it.
Yeah, but if you want to play around with it, that would be cool.
Yeah, that'll be definitely an interesting experiment. And then now, oh, I think it seems like somebody has to go in the chat. So, all right, bye. Thank you for checking into the stream.
Bye, thank you.
I mean, Kinsey is letting us know that they're going to have to play around with languages soon so that they can make a site in Korean.
Oh,
Awesome.
Cool.
that'll be interesting. Let's see. All right, now moving on to form elements. So form elements, basically a form element, obviously using form tags, creates a form. It's pretty self-explanatory. I said form in like 3 times in the same sentence. Takes in user input and can contain the following form elements. So within the form element, you can use these other additional elements to kind of define the form and really customize it. So the input element defines how user input is received. And as you can see below, this is some code that Daniel will later live demonstrate. But as you can see within the within the input element, there are a few attributes. So the type attribute specifies the type of input element. So as you can see, it's set to radio, and the radio value defines a radio button. So a radio button, you can kind of think of it as a multiple choice question. So out of those buttons, you can only select one. And the next attribute is ID. So this ID is set to dog, and kind of just hopping a little ahead, you can see that the dog ID, you can see for label, the label element underneath has the same value dog. So this label is attached to the input above. And I guess that's a little confusing, but once I get into label, I think it will make a little bit more sense. And the name attribute specifies the name for the input element, and the name attribute kind of ties together all the radio buttons. So as you can see on the right, there's like a few buttons. You'll actually be doing this in your homework this week. So all these different input, or I guess radio buttons, all will have the same name, and that kind of just ties all the radio buttons together. And the last attribute in the input element is value, and this specifies the value of the input element. And this can actually be used to reference this specific input element in JavaScript. So once Danielle gets into JavaScript, you guys can see how that is used. And let's see, I guess jumping into label, whatever basically whatever you put in between a set of label tags will appear as the label of the radio button. So I guess our code example doesn't exactly match the example on the right, but basically for the code underneath, as you can see, it's labeled dog. So dog will appear as the label next to the radio button. And because dogs, the for attributes value is set to dog, which is the same as the input, how do I say this? The input element ID attributes value, which is also equal to dog. I guess they just kind of match up. I don't know. I feel like that.
These are the
Yeah.
same. The ID over here is same for the for equals. And also you don't need to make a label button. You could also like just type out the text here and it'll pop up on the screen. You would just have to add like a break tag or something.
Yeah. And oh yeah, and I guess shout out to the break tag at the end of the label. We just learned that in the last slide. Hope y'all remember. And I guess for the last element is the button element, and creates a clickable button. And the type attribute, as you can see in the code below, is set to button, creates a clickable button. And the value attribute is set to submit. So when you set the value attribute to submit, it allows the button to submit form data. So as you can see, like for the right side, whichever time zone the user clicks on, the form will take that data, kind of take it, and then you can use it. And you can see that there is a onClick attribute, and this is set to validate form parentheses. So this is actually a JavaScript function that you'll set in JavaScript. So once this button is clicked, essentially, this stated function will run. So yeah, that is it for HTML. I guess, Margaret, do you have any maybe, I guess, are there any conventions when it comes to HTML that you think will be helpful going into HTML, or like writing HTML code?
Lols, I am not the person to ask about conventions. I don't know. As somebody that has a computer science degree, I will mention random facts if that's helpful. So, random fact. In addition to how she mentioned that you don't actually need a label tag in order to type dog next to your input tag and have it show up next to your input tag. That's actually something that I wanted to mention about the paragraph tag, which is that when you put text inside of your paragraph tag, it will show up on your web page. You don't need the paragraph tag to have text that you enter into the body of your website show up. However, putting it inside of a paragraph tag allows it to be styled as a single entity. And that's very much the same for the label tag here. It's not that you need the label tag for functionality, it's that the label tag creates new options for functionality because it allows you to reference either all labels or labels within a certain class or anything like that. So it's not so much that you need to have tags around all of your text, it's that having tags around all of your text allows you to manipulate that text in a useful way. I also want to mention that the button here, you don't have to have a button inside of a form. You can have a button all by itself. And if you put in that on click, it will reference the whatever is in that on click when it is clicked, even if it is not inside of a form. And if it is a submit button that is part of a form, it doesn't need the on click, because if in the opening tag of your form, you don't want to have an on click. If this is your whole page, the form is your whole page, then instead you can give it an action, which is a URL that it will submit the form to when you hit that submit button. So I think my point here, since I'm just being super confusing, I think my point here is that the thing about web development is there are always 5 to 50 ways to do everything that you ever wanted to do. So when you're trying to figure out how to do something, look around, and if you find an explanation that doesn't make sense to you, go look for another explanation, because there is definitely another way to do that. And whenever you find one that really clicks in your head, that's fine. That's the one you should start with, because just do it in the way that makes sense to you is absolutely the right starting place for every new learning.
Yeah, there really are so many capabilities with HTML. That's why it's like such a great language.
Oh, somebody brought up screen readers. Thank you for bringing up screen readers. So yes, screen readers are super, super important and very often overlooked. And HTML elements are actually super, super useful for this. If you are interested in having an accessible website, I highly recommend going and researching that as its own topic and playing around with that as its own topic, including going and getting yourself a screen reader so that you can play around with how important it is to have your entire website within descriptive tags so that the screen reader can read it in a way that makes sense to people with visual impairments. So thank you for that call out. That is super cool. And there is no quick, easy way to make your website perfect for screen readers. It is simply a matter of putting in the work and developing those good, healthy habits.
All right, awesome. So I think now we're going to do like a little bit of a live demo for basically just like doing what I have over here, so that you guys can see what it looks like when you use some of these elements in HTML. So I already have this file that I created earlier with just a body and a title. So maybe we'll do something like we'll ask the user what their favorite pet is. So I'll start with the paragraph tag. What is your favorite pet? I'll save that. And then Visual Studio Code also allows you to like run your code and debug it. So I'm just going to click run over here, and then it'll open it up for me in Chrome. You can also do this like with the terminal or just by clicking on your file in like your Finder or your like Explorer page thing. No matter. But I like to just use the run button because it's right there and it's easy. And then, yeah, we'll see that like it already just prints for you like what is your favorite pet. So from here, let's create some of those radio buttons. So yeah, we're going to use basically like the syntax. We're going to use the input field. And also because the input field is not a tag, you don't need to close it like you would a normal tag. So let's do input type equals radio button. Well, just radio. And we'll set the name equals to pet, and then value we'll set to dog, and ID set to dog. These don't have to be the same thing, the value and ID, but that's the only thing I could come up with for the dog option. So Like I said, you don't need to use the label button, but I'm just going to do it to demonstrate it for you guys. And then the label is a tag. It automatically closes for you if something is a tag, for the most part in whatchamacallit, in the Visual Studio Code. So,
or really any IDE.
Yeah.
And I think somebody mentioned in chat the live server extension is super useful. I think basically you can install an extension that's onto Visual Studio Code. We didn't cover that in the video, but I don't know, maybe Daniel, do you know how to add an extension onto Visual Studio Code?
I'm not sure, but I think I did see something when I was playing around with this.
I think
so
maybe if you sorry. I think
if
maybe
you sorry, you can go.
sorry, I'm so sorry. I think if you search it up, like the search icon on the left side, over there. I think, wait, was it here?
I think if you just click code and then preferences and then extensions.
Oh yeah, that works.
It allows you to add any extensions. And what extension was someone talking about?
I believe it's the live server extension. You can probably every single time you save your code, it will pop up on the web page. So it's feedback.
Okay, yeah, I'm not gonna install that right now because we're kind of short for time, but I'll try that out and maybe I'll do that for the next live stream. And yeah, I think these buttons over here is extensions. But yeah, we're gonna go back to the file. I opened up my document in the in Chrome, and as you can see, it lets me click dog, and it's a button now. So I'm just gonna copy these 2 lines. Another thing about coding is it's a lot of copying and pasting, but only if it's your own code. You can't copy and paste other people's code. That's illegal.
You can absolutely copy and paste other people's code. It's called Stack Overflow driven development, and it is totally valid.
So with this, the name button, the name and the type stay the same because the name is what's going to tie everything together. If I made a new name for everything, it would let me click all of the options, which would completely defeat the purpose of using radio buttons. So we're going to keep the name, and then we'll say cat maybe is another option. And then what's another pet?
Bunny.
Bunny, that's a good one.
I got 2 pet bunnies.
Oh, really? What are their names?
They are Soybean and Sesame.
That's so cute.
Yeah, I feel I don't know why it's so fun naming pets after foods. We're not gonna eat the pets.
It really is.
It's just cute,
My friend has a cat named Sushi, and it is the perfect name for the cat. I don't know why, but it is. Any other pets? I had a hamster. I had a hamster, and it had the same name as my sister because my roommates named it. And when I brought that hamster home, she was not happy. Okay, now when I refresh my page, you could see I can only click one of these. I'm also going to add a break after each line because it looks ugly without it.
See, there's a question in the chat. Should we upload every task to GitHub? For example, the first task is just setting up Visual Studio Code and creating an HTML file. What should we submit for that? So basically, do you want to go ahead, Danielle?
Oh yeah, sure. I think in the first task, you're creating an HTML file that prints one line of code, like hello world or something. So yeah, I want you guys to create a new branch, and basically to get into the second task, you have to merge your branch just because of the way that GitHub Learning Lab is set up. You have to create a new branch and then merge that branch in order to get the instructions for task 2. So yeah, as stupid as it is to upload a file that just says hello world, we're just
It's
trying
not
to get
stupid. It's practice.
exactly. We're trying to get you into like the practice of it and like we're trying to just get you used to like opening and pull requests on GitHub and merging them and stuff, because that's something you will have to like know how to do when you do like higher level projects and stuff. But yeah, right now I have this page that lets you click one button and creates a new line for every single element. And now all that's left to do, oh, this is all supposed to be within the form tag as well. So you can also do a little shorthand in Visual Studio Code where you could just click tab and it'll indent everything for you. And then I'm just going to add a button.
Oh, and Danielle, I guess after there's a question in the chat, can you show how to create an HTML file in Visual Studio Code again? I guess it's very easy. You can just go to like the upper left and hit the
Yeah, you just click this little icon, and then when you click it, index.html. I already have a file called that, but whatever you want to name it, and then you can just type .html and use that little shorthand of the, let's see if it'll do it again, exclamation point tab or exclamation point enter, and then it will like get all of that started for you. Yeah, so type equals submit, and then we will say value equals submit. Oh wait, type equals button. Whoops, sorry. And then, yeah, submit. And then the submit button doesn't do anything yet because we haven't gotten into JavaScript. But yeah, now we have a button and some radio buttons, which is awesome. Yeah, so now we're just going to go into the JavaScript really quickly. Does anyone have any questions on that page that I just made?
And we'll be sharing the slides afterwards. So if you guys maybe like you forgot something and you're like, oh, I don't really remember what a tag was in HTML, you guys can go and review that after we share these slides with you guys.
Mm-hmm. And then this stream will also be uploaded on Twitch if you guys want to rewatch it. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so JavaScript is a scripting language and a programming language. So unlike HTML, which is a markup language, a scripting language basically just means that you're translating the machine code when you compile the code, versus like some languages where like each line gets compiled manually. So this is a language similar to, I mean, another example for this is like Python or Ruby, if you might be familiar with something like that. And it's common for like shorter programs and scripts. Yeah. And then it's also, so JavaScript allows you to like create interactive web page features. So like HTML basically like lays out the web page, CSS like styles the web page, and then JavaScript lets you like make everything interactive. You can also use like dynamically updating content with JavaScript. So even if someone's not interacting with something, like the page can automatically change like on certain events. And it also allows you to like store variables, write functions, run commands on events, and like a bunch of other things. Margaret, is there anything you wanted to like say about JavaScript?
I think Margaret said she had to drop off.
Oh my gosh, I'm sorry. I like can't see who's here because, or the screen, because I'm sharing my screen. But oh, that's such a shame. She's so cool.
Yeah, I know, she was so cool. She was super helpful. Like,
oh my god, she's so much fun. And but so yeah, JavaScript just makes your page cooler. And for now, we're going to be using the JavaScript tag within an HTML file. So like, I'll show you what I'm talking about. You could put it within the head tag or within the body. Wouldn't recommend putting it outside of either of those. I like to put it in the body just because like most of my code goes in the body. So yeah, it's just like this script. And then that's where your JavaScript goes. And it's as simple as that. You can also create a JavaScript file and link it to your HTML file, which like we'll get into later, but like for now, we're just going to keep everything in one spot. So yeah, there's no properties required for it. It's just script, and the computer will know that it's JavaScript. Yeah, this just allows you to like keep all your code in one place and keep it simple. Does anyone have any questions about that?
I guess I can add a really quick question. I guess Daniel, do you know like the difference between HTML and JavaScript? Like, are they the same kind of language, or are they?
So HTML is a markup language, like we talked about earlier. So like, I don't really know what that means. I'll have to go back in the slides.
I guess it's just like
Oh, it describes a structure. Okay, so like, yeah. And then, but JavaScript is a programming language. So like, it's similar to like Python. Like, I don't know if any of you guys have used Python, but like the two are like actually pretty similar, except for like the syntax is a little bit different. But in the way that they run, I'm not sure how much like coding experience anyone here has, but like, it's also different from like Java or C++ or C, because like you'll notice when like compiling any of those languages, you can have like a bug on any line. If you like have a bug in JavaScript, you won't really like, the way it compiles is like it'll just like not show up. You kind of have to like figure it out on your own unless you use like a certain compiler. I think that's actually, now that I'm saying this out loud, I'm not sure if that's right. I think that's right. Or no, I have it backwards. You know what? I'm gonna stop talking about this because I have to do more before I keep talking. I'm sorry, guys. I'm like teaching this class without like knowing what I'm doing.
It's all good. We're all learning here. But I guess somebody in the chat said HTML is like the bones and JavaScript is like the blood and the oh no, I don't know how to pronounce this word. Microbes. Let's just say they're microbes and are alive and can get out of hand. Yeah, definitely. That's a very good analogy. I think like HTML is kind of like the skeleton, the structure and all that, and JavaScript kind of you can add interactivity to your web pages with JavaScript. So yeah,
Yeah,
that's
like I know streaming on Twitch always makes me feel stupid because like, but also like I love it because like people like correct me in the comments and stuff, but like I know what it makes sense in my head. I'm just bad at like relaying it out. But I really do appreciate that analogy. That was perfect. Thank you so much for that. But yeah, JavaScript, yeah, it like basically just like makes it work. Like HTML puts stuff on the page, CSS makes it pretty, and JavaScript like makes it interactive and like makes things like move and stuff. Like if you just had a page that just had HTML, it would look really bland and like you wouldn't be able to really do anything with it. It would just be like text on a page or images, but like stagnant stuff.
Yeah, and then somebody mentioned in the chat, JavaScript is an interpreted language, not a compiled language. A program such as C++ or Java needs to be compiled before it is run.
Right. Yeah. That's what I was trying to get at.
Yeah,
but
thank you. We really appreciate the comments, y'all.
Okay, so yeah, JavaScript tag. Now we're just gonna get into syntax. So there's two types of values in JavaScript. There's fixed values, these are called literals, and these are like numbers and like strings. And so like it's good to know that numbers can be written with or without decimals, like it doesn't really matter. And strings are defined using single quotes or double quotes. So yeah, if I wanted to say like a variable x equals like hello, it doesn't matter if I use like single quotes or double quotes to define that as long as like I'm consistent with it in that one spot. And then there's also variable values, which are called variables. And that's like a variable in math or a variable in any other coding language. You do have to use the var keyword to declare them. And you can make assignments using the equal sign. So over here, I said like var x equals 6 equals hello, I'm sorry. Or I could do var x in one line and then x equals hello. Those both would do the same thing. But yeah, and then from there, yeah, does anyone have any questions about variables and like why we use them or anything like that?
I guess for a quick question, like this other than words, is there anything else you can set, like any other value you can set a variable to? Like, can you set numbers or?
Yeah, so a variable can really be assigned to like anything, like a number, another variable. So if I have variable x equals 4, and then variable y equals like a text thing, like you could even just like reassign variables like x equals y and it'll just overwrite it. Yeah. And then you can also use like operators on variables. So like the standard like plus, minus, multiplication, divide. Pretty sure these three are reserved for math, like as far as like you can't like do a string minus a string or a string times a string or a string divided by a string, but you can like concatenate strings. So like say we wanted to like print out something that like let me do something really quick. Document inner HTML. Oh wait. I'm just gonna create something over here that I'll explain a little bit. See if that works. Right, cool. So if I wanted to like concatenate, like if I wanted to print out like text equals 4, I could say like y, nothing is y, r print equals, let's say if we wanted to say text equals 4, we could do y plus, and then like space equal sign plus x, and this would print out the value of x, I'm sorry, the value of y, and then a space, and then an equal sign, and a space, and the value of x. So if I save that and refresh my page over here, it says text equals 4, even though that doesn't make any sense. Those are just like words I used. That's how you can like concatenate strings in JavaScript. And then also briefly want to talk about equality. So if you're not familiar with like any coding language, this is probably new to you, but since the singular equal sign is reserved for assignment, like I talked about in the last slide, we use the double equal signs to represent like if something is equal to. So if you're using like a conditional, like we'll talk about later, then you would want to use this to check the equality of two items. And then this would do the opposite. The exclamation point equals 2 would tell you if something is not equal to something. And then by the same logic, less than and equal to, less than and greater than are just less than or greater than. Does anyone have any questions about that? Okay, I'm just gonna move on for now. So these are just some like miscellaneous tips for JavaScript syntax. So JavaScript is case sensitive. If you're using an IDE like this, like when I say case sensitive, I don't mean like you can't write var in all capitals because it will like just like correct it for you. But like say you're defining a variable called x. If I also created a variable with capital X equals 5, like then you'll see when I refresh my page, it'll still come up as 4 because those are two different variables. So yeah, when you're naming things, just keep that in mind. And hyphens are not allowed in JavaScript. They're reserved for subtraction. So when you're naming an element, you can't say like var like, sorry, let me mute my text. Where the heck is do not disturb? Sorry. So if you're naming an element like I am forgetting the English language right now. I just don't have any words in my head right now for like naming an element. I'm sorry. But see, like this will just like come up as it's not working because you can't use a hyphen in naming an element. Yeah, because that's reserved for like the mathematical equation. And then you can also make comments in HTML. So to make a comment for a single line, you could just do \\\, and that you'll see it turns green. And if you wanted to do it across a number of lines, you could do \\, and then asterisk, and then you would close that out with like the reverse on the other side, and that'll comment out as many lines as you like. And also, it's important to know that every single line of uncommented code needs to be immediately followed by a semicolon, so that this is like lets the computer know that you're done typing that line out. Now moving on to functions. A function, if you're not aware, like in computer science, is just like a block of code designed to complete a task. It basically just like makes your code a lot simpler and easier to read, and it allows a specific set of actions to be completed several times for several different applications. So if you wanted to like make a function that like takes two numbers and like multiplies them together, then like this would be a really useful function because you can use it over and over instead of like having to complete the same task in different situations. And this is executed when something invokes it or calls it. So when you're calling a function, say I had a function named my function, and it took a number, any variable x as a parameter. Say I wanted to like multiply x, return x times x. And that basically just gives you like something that just does a math operation for you. If I wanted to call that function, I would just type the name of the function, so my function, and then whatever number I want to pass, let's say 3, and that would basically just do that operation. So you just, to call an element, to call a function, you just call its name, and then use the parentheses. So yeah, if this didn't have a parameter, you would just do my function with just parentheses. And then sometimes you'll have functions that are self-invoked, which I'll talk about later. And sometimes, like Emily talked about earlier in that one example, we had the on-click feature of the submit button. And when you click the submit button, it does a JavaScript function. That would be an example of like when an event occurs, like you would call a function. And yeah, like I just said, this is like the syntax of a function. You have to use this variable. I'm sorry, not variable. This keyword function, like you kind of have to use variable or var, I'm sorry, to like define a variable, and then the name and parentheses, and then these curly braces define what is going to be done in the function. So everything that you want to complete in that function has to go within these curly braces. Also important to note that like you're not supposed to like follow these curly braces with a semicolon like you would any other line, but everything inside needs to be followed with a semicolon. And then, yeah, is there anything I didn't go over? Oh yeah, so you might have parameters with this, which can be separated by commas. Like I had here, you can pass x, let's pass x and y, and we can multiply x by y. These parameters are like given to you when you call the function. So if I called this like with no parameters later, you'll see that there would be like an issue. Let me run it. Why isn't this working?
See, are you missing the semicolon or anything?
No, yeah, there is an issue. Maybe that's why it's not working, is because there's an issue. If I type in like 3, 4. Oh, you know what? It's because I have these variables. Let me change this. N and N. Okay, yeah, this is because I'm pretty sure this issue is happening because there's no way for me to run it because I'm calling a function that, oh wait, that's weird. I don't know what I just did. I'm sorry, guys. But my whole point was you can't have a function, you can't call a function if it's empty. I mean, if it has parameters, you can't call it with no parameters. You need to pass those parameters along. And those parameters can also be like predefined variables. But what's important to remember is that you can't have these names overlap with like pre-existing variables, like because then you'll have issues when you're trying to write the function. But yeah, we'll like scope these parameters basically exist for like the scope of the function. So they only exist within this function. And so like I could redefine n over here and it wouldn't be an issue, but like I could not define it beforehand because then the computer will be confused when it tries to like use n over here, if that makes sense. Does anyone have any questions about that? I feel like I didn't explain that well.
I guess one thing I could add is like if you're like if you have like a lot of functions or a lot of variables and maybe you want to use similar names but you don't want to get confused, you can use something called, you can use like let's say you want to name 2 variables, like one color red and the other like color blue, and what you can do is you can add like underscores and all that to kind of like differentiate the 2 words like color and red for separate words and all that. Or you can use something called camel case where like the first word, let's say if like you say color red, like the first word would be color, and then you would capitalize like red.
Yeah, so color red, or you could do color red.
Yeah.
This is like using an underscore, and then this is camel case. I think
So
there's also like snake case or something where like you capitalize the first letter of both. I don't even know what I'm saying, but but yeah, this is what I was saying earlier, where like it's case sensitive, so you can like define variables with like the same name, but like change the letters around a little bit. And I'm gonna delete this stuff because it's confusing to me. Okay, yeah, so that basically goes over the syntax. Return statements. You don't need a return in your function, like technically, but you could either do like either do a blank return or like an empty return that doesn't return anything but just like ends the function basically. This will be useful if like if you have if statements inside of your function and like you're trying to figure out like you want like the function to basically return when and like end if a case is satisfied. But normally you'll have like it'll return a value or like a variable like I had earlier where it like returned x times y. And that will just like basically when you call that function, so say I did like, sorry, not gonna call it beforehand, but like variable x equals my func. If I wanted to like print that out, x would then be 5. So yeah, it just like returns, it gives whoever called the function or invoked the function that value when you return it. Does that make sense? Does anyone have any questions about that? Okay, so now we're just going to go over conditionals really quick. An if statement just defines a block that's to be executed if and only if a condition is true. So I'll show you really quick. We have if, let's say x, let's do this inner function. So good example, we'll pass along this variable. So if that variable is less than 5, then we want to do something like, let's say, let's return variable times 2. That will say that like if that variable I pass is less than 5, then I'll multiply it by 2. Otherwise, we could do an else if, and this just like looks for another condition. So basically, if this variable is true, then we'll return this. But if it's not true, then we'll look in the else if. And so let's say variable is greater than 10, then we'll return variable divided by 2. And then else basically just does any other condition. So like if variable is less than 5, it is greater than 5 and less than 10, then this case will happen because it doesn't satisfy either of these. And we'll return variable. So if I called this on, let's say, 5, on 4, kind of be a bad example, then it should like complete the first case. So 4 times 2 is 8, which is what we get over here. If we did it on 6, then it should complete the third case. So variable is staying the same, so it just prints out 6. And if I did it on 10, or let's say 12, then it would divide 12 by 2 because it satisfies the second case, and we would have 6 again. Does anyone have any questions on that? There's also like a lot of really, really good resources online that explain if statements, if I'm not doing a good job, because I feel like I'm never doing a good job at explaining anything.
No, you're doing, I think yeah, JavaScript, I know if you guys like haven't done like had any coding experience, it could be really intimidating, like what are these if statements and tags and all of that. It can be really confusing. But just like take some time and you can do something similar to what Danielle is doing, is just like making variables, creating functions, just playing around with it. And I think through that and bumping into errors and learning how to debug them, kind of going through that process over and over again and practicing JavaScript can definitely help you understand these concepts a lot more.
Yeah, definitely. And like if you do have experience with other languages, I'm sure like this, you're like just wish I would shut up already because this is probably so simple to you and you've done this before. But yeah, I'm just gonna move on now. Loops. For loops are the only thing we're going to be talking about right now. You'll also notice how all of these have kind of like the same syntax where like you have like something in the parentheses and you need to like have some identifier or like keyword here and then like curly braces. Curly braces in general just like define like multiple lines of code in one. Yeah, so like they kind of like group code together. But I'm just going to do a little quick example of a for loop right now. Or actually, I think I had an example. No, I don't. Okay, yeah. So a for loop, it loops through a block of code a set number of times. This basically just kind of like a function, like simplifies your code. But like in the case of a for loop, you're doing the same exact thing several times where a function can be like applied. It has to be like applied manually. But yeah, this is just completing the same exact task. So say if you wanted to print out like the numbers 1 through 100, that's when you want to use a for loop because you're printing out a number every single time and you don't want to write out code that like manually, you don't want to write out 100 lines of code that prints out 1 through 100. Like that would just be super tedious and annoying. So a for loop would like simplify that for you. So this is the syntax for it. I'll write it out because I think it makes more sense when you write it out. So you have to start it with the keyword for. So let's print out the numbers 1 through 100. I'm going to do it outside of this. Down here. Okay, so for, and we're going to define a variable I. It doesn't have to be I, but I is like pretty standard. So for variable I equals 0 and I is less than 100. Because of the way we count in computer science, like we always start at 0. And because of the way for loops work, like you're basically, when I set this up, I'm gonna decrement every single, actually no, if I want to print out 1 through 100, I would have to start at 1. And then
101?
it's less than 101, right?
Yeah, I think so.
I'm like doubting everything I've ever learned. Why can't this is like so simple? Why can I not remember if this is right? Let me print this out and make sure it's right before I continue. Sorry, guys. Equals I. Okay, that's right. This is right. So, I'm sorry. I would, because of the way this works, I would not. I'm like basically instead of like, this isn't a good example for HTML because I'm just like applying this on the same div. So at the end, it's just gonna show 100. But if you wanted to do something 100 times, or why am I like blanking on my examples right now?
Like maybe set a variable and like have it print out and then increment at the end. So once it enters the for loop, it like changes the value. It's like the next value. That prints out. I don't know. So that would like list all the values 1 through 100. I don't exactly remember how to implement that.
The way that my issue with this is that I'm changing like a div element every time. So I like at the end, it's just gonna print 100. But changing something on a page is like a bad example for this because I'm updating the same div element. But if you want to complete a task 100 times, this is how you would, I would just do I equals 0, I is less than 100. And that would complete a task 100 times. But basically, yeah. So we're just going to talk about the conditions right now. And then I'm going to explain it better in the homework, like why you're using a for loop. So like, don't worry about me giving a terrible example right now. But yeah, if you want to complete the same task 100 times, you set this variable I equals to 0. And then, like I said, so the way a for loop works is that you decrement your value that you define here after it's completed. So this will only go up to 99 because it goes up until I is less than 100. This is like the conditional value that has to be satisfied every single time for the for loop to complete. So every time the for loop runs, it checks if I is less than 100. And then it completes the task, and then it increments I. So on the 99th time, it checks is I less than 100? Yes. And then it completes this one task, and then it increments I. So then the next time you do it, I is equal to 100. So that it stops and the for loop breaks. And I think that's the best way I can explain it for now. Does there anyone have any questions? Is anyone even still watching? I think I would leave by now.
Yeah, sorry we've been going for a little longer. Like we're very much over time, but
We're almost done.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess we're if you oh my gosh, my brain isn't working anymore.
We will be quicker next week, I promise.
Yeah, but there's just a lot of content to go through. Oh, thank you, still here, but I think I'll watch the recording later. Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you for still being here. Of course, if you guys have to go, no worries. You guys can leave. You guys can always watch the recording later. But if you guys stay, we appreciate you.
Or you can always look back on these slides, of course.
Yeah.
Okay, this is the last thing I'm going to go over, document object, which is what I did before, this little line of code. So this is like something you'll use in JavaScript to like connect your code to the HTML. So when we want to grab an element by ID, this will like return an element with any given ID. And then, so basically what you would normally do is you would define an element. So variable, let's just do LM. And then I would do document dot get element by ID. And so I want to grab this tag that I made, this div tag I made earlier, and I want to update what's in it. So I'm going to look for an element with the ID example, EX. And that's why it's really important why you make the ID of every single element unique, so that like you can grab that element if you want it later. And that returns this div element. Now what I want to do is change the output of that element. So I'm going to go over here and I'm going to change the inner HTML of it. And I'm going to update it with this new content. That just changes the inner HTML of an element. So I'm going to say lm.innerHTML equals, let's say, hello world. Now, if I update this over here, it'll say hello world on this little tag. And I think there's like a couple other things you could change the attribute of an element. So say I wanted to do dots like set attribute, and I wanted to change the color attribute. I think I could do the color red. I think this would work. Not 100% sure though. Nope, that didn't work. Oh wait, because color isn't a thing. You know what? We're not gonna play with that right now. You don't really have to worry about that now. We'll get into that more when we're like doing CSS next week. But for now, we're gonna change the inner HTML equals, yeah, hello world. And that's just basically how you change the text that would go right here using JavaScript, which is pretty neat, if you ask me. Yeah, and I think that's the last slide I had. But I'm going to finish this demo really quick so that you guys can actually like figure out how to grab this stuff. So in this function, first thing I'm going to do is link this submit button with this function. So I would do onClick equals myfunc, and then those parentheses. And I'm going to delete this little variable because we don't need that. And yeah, I'm going to copy this, put it inside of my function because I'm going to use it. And yeah. So what we want to do right now is grab all of these elements. So they all have the same name tag. So we're going to say var, let's say it's called buttons or radio buttons equals document dot get element by name. And I'm going to pass the name pet because they all have the same name attribute pet. What this is going to do is print out, here, let me show you guys. So this is going to print out all of the, oh wait, yeah, you can't print out an element. I'm stupid. But this is just going to create an array of all of the elements that, like all of these radio buttons. And the next thing we're going to want to do is loop through them. So for I equals 0, I less than, since we want to loop through all of these radio buttons, we're going to use this length feature. So radio buttons.length and then I++. This is just going to go through each and every radio button. And yeah, you just use radio buttons.length and this returns the size of this array. And if you don't know what an array is, it basically is just a list of items. It's like holding several variables in one variable. And so yeah, let's, okay, so now we're gonna see if, let me actually just do something. We'll print out, actually, no, we're not gonna worry about that right now. We're gonna check to see if each variable is checked. So radio buttons, so we're gonna use an if statement. If radio buttons at I, by using the, whatchamacallit, these square brackets, it allows you to like index into this array. So it allows you to like get each element and like, basically it's gonna return, radio buttons at 0 would be this element right here, it would return that. And then radio buttons at 1 would return this. Yeah. So at I dot check, which is just an attribute of the input field, which represents if an element is selected. If that's equal to true, then we want to return that element. So return radio buttons at I. Yeah, so this will find the element that is checked. So let's actually try this out. So var element equals that. And then we're going to change the inner text of this div that I created earlier to print out whatever element is selected. So we're going to print out, we're going to call, Oh, we're gonna do that's a for loop. Oh, okay. Sorry, guys. So we're not gonna return. That doesn't make sense. I don't know what I'm writing. You could make that a function though if you wanted to just return that. That would also make sense. But yeah, sorry. You're gonna want to create another variable. Let's call it selected. And we'll set it equal to the first radio button as a default. So radio button's at 0. And then, so instead of returning that, we will change that selected to radio button I. And then inner element will be selected dot value, since we want to return the value element of this, and it'll print out whatever's selected. Yeah, so let's try that out. So if I select cat, will it print that? Awesome, it works.
Nice.
And then, okay, cool. So yeah, really quickly, once again, this is what I'm doing. So I'm calling this function on the click and over here. And then what this function does, it creates the array of radio buttons, creates a variable that's going to hold the checked button, and then it loops through all of the radio buttons looking for the checked button. And once it finds that checked button, it prints out that checked button or selects that. And you could also move this code in here, like these 2 lines, or not those 2 lines, but you could move this line in here and that would do the same thing. And then it changes the inner HTML of this div to be that selected value. And that's this element or this or this or this. Yeah. And that code is going to be posted to the GitHub page. Wow, that was a mouthful. Does anyone have any questions now?
I guess I can bring up a question. I noticed that you use like an if statement within the for loop. If you have an if statement, do you have to have an else statement? And yeah, I guess, do you have to have an else statement?
That is a very good question. You don't. You really don't have to have an else statement. It really depends on the situation, but like I would recommend normally having an else statement, but here, like since I'm looking for something, like I also would add a return right here, or not a return, a break. This basically just breaks it out of the for loop so that it knows to stop looking for like whatever I'm looking for, and like, well, actually, that's a bad way to put it. The reason I would put a break statement is so that because I'm done looking for an element, so I would like let the computer know that it can stop its for loop. And yeah.
All right. Any other questions, guys?
Yeah, I'm gonna stop sharing my screen now so I can see if anyone has any wonderful questions. Is anyone still here? Literally, I can't even find my StreamYard thing. Oh, here we are. You've got 5 viewers still.
Hell yeah.
Hi, Shreya. We are cool. Thanks.
Hello. Yes.
I'm so sorry this went so far over time, guys. I promise it won't next week.
Yeah, it's just because we're kind of like setting the foundation for anyone who doesn't have like any coding experience. I hope that to kind of like give you a pretty good foundation for you to start the homework. So it was a lot of content. I know it might be a bit confusing and intimidating to go into, but if you guys have any questions, feel free to reach out to us anytime, and we'll answer your questions to the best of our ability.
Okay, thank you guys so much for coming today. This was awesome. I'll see you guys next week, and we'll also be putting the link to the slides and the code in the Discord channel.
All right, thank you so much, guys.
Okay, bye.